All right, let's dive into software testing,
Okay,
specifically test estimation.
sounds good.
You've sent over a ton of material on this, so it sounds like you're gearing up for a project.
Yeah, getting ready to.
We see you've got some excerpts from Guru 99,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great starting point for anyone who wants to get a handle on this stuff.
It is.
That's a really good resource.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like you're interested in not just the how-to of estimating,
Right.
but also the why.
Yes.
Why it even matters in the first place.
Understanding the why is key. It helps you appreciate the process and apply it more effectively.
Exactly. So before we get into specific techniques, let's talk about why this matters.
Okay.
Guru 99 really hits the nail on the head when they point out the two big questions every client will ask.
Mm-hmm.
How long will testing take, and how much will it cost?
The two big ones.
I bet you're already thinking about those questions for your own project. Absolutely. Those questions are on every client's mind. And getting those estimates right is the foundation for a successful project. It's all about setting realistic expectations, planning resources, and ultimately delivering on time and within budget.
It's like building a house you wouldn't start without a blueprint. Right?
Exactly.
You need a plan that breaks the project down into manageable stages.
You got it?
That's where the work breakdown structure, or WBS, comes in.
Yes.
Guru 99 actually has a great visual of this, showing how you can break down a project, let's say testing a bank's website, into smaller and smaller pieces.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The WBS is your project blueprint. To start with the big picture, testing the website, then break it down into modules like user login, account management, transactions. Each module then gets broken down further into specific tasks like verify password strength requirements or test transaction confirmation process. This way you're not overwhelmed by the complexity of the whole project.
And I noticed in the Guru 99 example, they even break those tasks down further into subtasks. They really emphasize how thorough this process needs to be.
It's all about accounting for every piece of the puzzle. Missing those smaller details can really throw off your estimates later. But a detailed WBS helps you visualize every step and ensures you're not overlooking anything.
So once you have this detailed breakdown, what's next?
Then you need to figure out who's doing what.
Okay.
This is where having a balanced team with different skills comes into play. The Guru 99 chart shows how roles like testers, analysts, and administrators are assigned to different tasks based on their expertise.
Right, it's like assembling a team of specialists. You need people who are skilled in different areas of testing to cover all aspects of the software. You wouldn't want your plumber installing your electrical wiring, right?
Exactly. You need the right expertise for each task. Now comes the tricky part, figuring out how much effort each task will actually take. Guru 99 highlights two main methods for this, the function point method and the three-point estimation.
Okay, let's break those down. The function point method seems to be all about understanding the complexity of the software itself.
It is, think of it like this. Imagine each feature of the software has a certain weight based on how complex it is. A simple feature like a balance inquiry on a banking website might have a low weight, while the more complex feature like a fund transfer would have a higher weight.
So it's like a points system for complexity.
Yes.
The more points, the more effort required.
Exactly. By adding up all the points for each feature within a task, you get a total measure of how much effort that task will require. Guru 99 even gives a formula to calculate this, and they use the bank website example to show it in action.
That's really helpful to see it applied to a real-world scenario. Now, how about the three-point estimation? This one seems a bit more, well, human.
It does, doesn't it? This method acknowledges that things don't always go as planned. It's about considering the best case, most likely, and worst case scenarios for each task. Think of it as planning for those unexpected delays or roadblocks that pop up in every project.
So instead of assuming everything will go perfectly, you're building in a buffer.
Precisely. Let's say you're estimating the effort to create test specifications. In a perfect world, your team might finish in 120 hours. That's your best case scenario. But you also need to consider the most likely scenario, maybe 170 hours based on past experience. And then there's the worst case scenario where things get really tricky and it takes 200 hours.
So you're creating a range of estimates to account for uncertainty.
Yes, and using a formula provided by Guru 99, you can calculate the expected effort based on those three scenarios. It's a way of acknowledging that software development is unpredictable.
So we've got these two main techniques. Function points, which is all about assigning weights based on software complexity, and three-point estimation, which is about considering those best, worst, and most likely cases. But Guru 99 also mentions other techniques like the wideband Delphi use case point method and a few others.
Right, they touch on those briefly. Think of it like having different tools in your toolbox. You wouldn't use a hammer for every job. Right? The same goes for estimation techniques. Each one has its pros and cons, and you need to choose the best one for the specific project and your team's working style.
It's all about having options and choosing the right tool for the job. And I noticed Guru 99 also talks about two broader approaches to estimation, top-down and bottom-up.
There's like two different philosophies of estimation. Top-down is more about relying on experience and classifying projects based on their overall size and complexity.
Right.
It's quicker, but might not be as accurate for more intricate projects. Bottom-up, on the other hand, involves getting input from everyone involved to create detailed estimates for each task. This takes more time, but can lead to greater accuracy.
So it's like choosing between a quick, high-level estimate and a more detailed, collaborative approach.
Exactly, and which one you choose depends on your project's specific needs and constraints.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already. We talked about why estimation is so important, how the work breakdown structure helps you break down a project, and those two key estimation techniques, function points and three-point estimation.
Right.
But how do these actually play out in a real project?
That's the key, right?
Yeah.
Let's go back to that bank website example from Guru 99. Remember, one of the tasks we identified was create the test specification. Guru 99 actually uses this task to illustrate both the function point and three-point estimation methods.
Perfect. So we're zooming in on one specific piece of the larger project, which helps us see these methods in action.
Exactly. Let's start with the function point method.
Okay.
Remember how we assign weights to each feature based on its complexity?
Right.
So balance inquiry might get a weight of 3, while fund transfer, being more complex, gets a 5.
Right. It's like a complexity scoring system.
Exactly. Guru 99 calculates that for this create the test specification task, all those weights add up to 34 function points.
Okay, so we have a complexity score, but how do we turn that into an actual estimate of effort, like in hours?
That's where the estimate defined per function point comes in.
Okay.
It's basically how much effort on average it takes your team to handle one unit of complexity, one function point. Let's say, based on their experience, the team estimates it takes them 5 hours per function point.
So if our task has 34 function points and it takes 5 hours per point, we just multiply those to get our total estimate.
You got it. 34 times 5 equals 170 man-hours. That's our initial estimate for creating the test specification using the function point method.
That makes sense now. How would we approach this same task using the three-point estimation method?
Remember, with this method, we're looking at the best case, most likely, and worst case scenarios for creating the test specification. Guru 99 gives us those three estimates: 120 hours for the best case, 170 for the most likely, and 200 for the worst.
So it's like saying, hey, if everything goes perfectly, we could knock this out in 120 hours. Realistically, it'll probably take 170. But hey, if things go sideways, it could take as long as 200.
Exactly. It's a more nuanced way of looking at estimates, acknowledging that things don't always go as planned.
And I bet having that worst case scenario in mind helps you plan for contingencies and manage expectations.
Absolutely. It's about being prepared for those unexpected hiccups.
So we've seen how these two methods are applied to a specific task, but Guru 99 also reminds us that estimates are not set in stone. Things change. Team members might go on vacation, unexpected technical issues pop up, or the client might even change the requirements. How do you deal with that constant flux?
That's where the art of estimation comes in. It's not just about plugging numbers into a formula. It's about being flexible and adapting to the realities of the project. Guru 99 highlights a few key things to keep in mind. First, resource planning is crucial. You need to consider who's available and account for things like vacations or other commitments that might impact their time.
Right. You can't assume everyone will be available 24/7.
Exactly. And second, using past experience is invaluable if you've worked on similar projects before. Tap into that knowledge to inform your estimates and avoid repeating past mistakes.
It's all about learning from those experiences, both good and bad.
Absolutely. And finally, regularly reevaluating your estimates is key. Don't treat them as if they're carved in stone. Things change constantly in software development, so be prepared to adjust as needed.
So it's a continuous process, not a one-time activity.
Precisely. Now, while we focused on function point and three-point estimation, it's good to know there are other options out there. Guru 99 briefly mentions techniques like wideband Delphi use case point method and a few others.
It's like having different tools in your toolkit. You choose the best one for the job.
Right.
What are some of the key differences between these other techniques?
Well, wideband Delphi, for example, is a collaborative estimation technique that involves multiple experts anonymously providing their estimates, then discussing and refining those estimates as a group
Yeah.
This helps to eliminate bias and arrive at a more consensus-based estimate.
So it's like crowdsourcing your estimations.
Exactly. The use case point method is a bit more involved, but it's particularly useful for projects with well-defined use cases or user scenarios. It involves identifying and weighting those use cases to estimate the effort required for each.
So it's a more granular approach that focuses on user interactions with the software.
Precisely. And then you have methods like percentage distribution and ad hoc estimation, which are less formal, but can be useful in certain situations. Percentage distribution is often used in conjunction with other techniques, where you allocate a certain percentage of the overall project effort to testing. Ad hoc, as the name suggests, is a more informal approach based on expert judgment and experience, but it's less structured and can be less accurate.
It sounds like each technique has its own strengths and weaknesses, and it's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that Guru 99 also discusses two overarching approaches to estimation: top-down and bottom-up. We touched on this briefly earlier, but it's worth revisiting. Top-down is a more high-level approach, relying on experience and classifying projects based on their size and complexity. It's a quicker way to get a rough estimate, but it might not be as accurate for complex projects.
Right. It's like making an educated guess based on previous projects. Exactly. Bottom up, on the other hand, involves getting detailed input from all stakeholders involved in the project to create very granular estimates for each task. This takes more time and effort, but it often leads to more accurate estimates, especially for complex projects.
So it's a trade-off between speed and accuracy.
Precisely. And the best approach will depend on your specific project, your team, and your organization's preferences.
This is all incredibly helpful. I'm starting to see how test estimation is much more than just pulling numbers out of thin air. It's about understanding your project, your team's capabilities, and choosing the right tools and approaches. But amidst all this talk about time, effort, and cost, it makes me wonder, where does quality fit into all of this?
That's a great question, and one that often gets overlooked. Guru 99 focuses heavily on estimating time and cost, but quality is a crucial part of the equation. It's the classic project management triangle: time, cost, and quality. You can't have it all, so you need to find a balance.
So how do you factor in the need for thorough testing without blowing the budget or timeline? It requires careful planning, clear communication, and a deep understanding of the project's goals. Sometimes you might need to make tough decisions about what to prioritize if time and cost are absolutely fixed. You might have to make compromises on the scope of testing, for example. Instead of testing every single feature exhaustively, you might focus on the most critical ones.
So it's about making strategic choices based on the project's constraints.
Exactly. And other times you might need to advocate for more time or resources if you believe that thorough testing is absolutely essential for the project's success. It's about having open and honest conversations with stakeholders and finding the best path forward.
It's like you're walking a tightrope,
Yeah.
trying to balance time, cost, and quality.
Mm-hmm.
But what really stood out to me from all this is that test estimation isn't just about crunching numbers.
It's not just number crunching. It's a strategic process. You're assessing risks, understanding your team's capacity, and making informed decisions based on what's best for the project.
And it sounds like communication is key. You need to be able to explain those decisions to stakeholders
Right.
and manage their expectations throughout the process.
Transparency and clear communication can make a huge difference in keeping a project on track, especially when those inevitable curveballs come your way.
Speaking of curveballs, Guru 99 does a good job of reminding us that things don't always go according to plan. You can have the most meticulous estimates, but then someone gets sick, a critical tool malfunctions, or the client decides they need a completely new feature.
Right. Real-world projects are full of surprises. That's why it's so important to build some flexibility into your estimates and to be prepared to adjust as needed.
So it's an ongoing process,
Yeah.
not a one-and-done exercise. You're constantly evaluating, refining, and adapting based on new information and the ever-changing project landscape.
Exactly. And it's a skill that develops over time. The more you do it, the better you get at anticipating those potential roadblocks and factoring them into your estimates.
It sounds like experience is a crucial factor in becoming a skilled estimator. Do you have any tips for someone who's just starting out in this area?
Absolutely. First, don't be afraid to ask for help if you're unsure about something. Reach out to more experienced team members or mentors for guidance. Second, document everything. Keep track of your estimates, the actual time spent on tasks. Any challenges you encounter. This will be invaluable data to inform your future estimates. And finally, be open to feedback. Don't take it personally if your estimates need adjusting. It's all part of the learning process.
That's great advice, and it makes me think about something we haven't really touched on yet. Guru 99 focuses heavily on estimating time and cost, but How do you actually measure the quality of your testing? What are some key metrics to look for?
That's a fantastic question. Ultimately, you want to deliver high-quality software, not just software that's on time and within budget. Some common metrics for assessing testing quality include the number of defects found and fixed test coverage, how much of the software has been tested, and customer satisfaction after release.
So it's not just about how quickly you can get through the testing process, but about how effective that testing is in uncovering and resolving issues before they reach the user.
Exactly. And this ties back into our earlier discussion about the project management triangle.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might need to make trade-offs. If you cut corners on testing to save time or money, you might end up with lower quality software that requires more fixes and updates later on, which could ultimately cost more in the long run.
It's that classic saying, pay now or pay later. Investing in thorough testing upfront can save you a lot of headaches and expenses down the line.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance that works best for your specific project and your organization's priorities.
This has been a truly enlightening deep dive into the world of software test estimation. We've covered a lot of ground, from understanding the why of estimation to exploring different techniques and even grappling with that tricky balance between time, cost, and quality.
And I think the key takeaway is that estimation is both an art and a science.
Yeah.
It requires the right tools, a solid understanding of the project, and the flexibility to adapt to the unexpected.
Exactly. So as you embark on your own testing journey, remember to stay curious, keep learning, and don't be afraid to adjust course along the way. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those testing skills sharp.